I'm here today to show you the products and services that we offer our customers. A little background on Transaction Services. We are primarily a technology infrastructure that's designed to make the merchant processing experience better. We maintain this environment in-house and are very proud of some of the things that we're able to provide to our customers. One of the first questions that I get quite often is, I can't remember where I go to log into the site. And so I'm now on our marketing website, which you can find at transactionservices.com or trxservices.com. And at the top right-hand side, there's an easy-to-find login button. When you click that login button, it takes you to our login screen. I'll change now to our test environment and go full screen. The username for most customers is their email address. In this case, I'm using a test account, and a temporary password is assigned to all accounts, and it's usually alphanumeric with special characters. I recommend pasting that in the password field instead of trying to make sure you have all the characters correct. The first thing that you'll see when you try logging in is that the system will prompt you to change your password. These are passwords that are assigned to each user account, and they aren't known by our staff. Sometimes people will call saying that they forgot their password. There's also a forgot password process that I can show you in a minute. But when you create a new password, the system's designed to assure that you follow the rules, which are making sure that a password is between 8 and 15 characters in length, that it contains one lowercase letter, that it contains at least one capital letter, and that it contains one number and then one special character, such as a exclamation, an @ sign, $sign, or the like. When you enter a new password, the system will tell you if that password is considered strong, and it will confirm that you have entered it twice correctly. And then when you hit submit, it will go ahead and log you into the system. A common call to Transaction Services customer service is regarding password reset. If a user has forgotten their password, they can go ahead and enter their username and click Forgot Password. When they click Forgot Password, the page will say that your password has been reset and you'll receive an email with a temporary password. If you do not receive an email, please contact customer support for further assistance. And there's a link which would create an email that goes to support@trxservices.com. When a user clicks the Forgot Password link, they will receive an email with a temporary password, as pictured here. When I add that temporary password and hit sign on, I'm required to change my password. Passwords cannot be one of the last 3 passwords used. The user must enter their password twice, and it must match each time. And this section of the page will show you whether or not a password is considered a strong password or not. When you're first logged into the processing system, you are immediately put on the Settings and Preferences page. We don't encourage customers to leave this as the default, but to rather spend just a second to make sure that the site is configured to your best preference. I usually recommend that under the dashboard preferences, check all of the options that are available. Because our reporting system is both hierarchy-based and permissions set, there are often a lot of different configured pages that you could or could not have access to. And if you have any questions about some of that feature functionality, feel free to call our support team at 888-933-8797, option 2 for support, and they can go ahead and advise you on what the next best settings would be. But for me, I prefer to make sure that I have the start page set to the dashboard. And then you just hit save at the bottom right-hand side. Going through the management tools from the left to right, what I'll show you is first our dashboard. Dashboard configuration shows a graph that will show your month-over-month sales volume. It'll show a breakdown of card processing type and then a month-over-month summary. All of the tiles on the dashboard page are drag and drop, so you can change the position of them and that will be remembered. You can also change the time frame that you'd like to look at. So if perhaps you want to look at a 3-month or just the previous month era, and then once you hit submit, it will save this as part of your preferences and keep it for the next time that you log in. There's an option to add additional tiles so the dashboard can be configured to look the way that the merchant finds it most beneficial. Under the Tools tab, Transaction Services makes available to all of their merchant customers a virtual terminal. The virtual terminal allows the merchant to process a credit card transaction in either a card not present or card present manner. So if I came in here and I said I wanted to process a $10 transaction, I have the option of using a card or a token, which I'll talk about in just a second. Whether or not I want that transaction to be card present, which would require a swipe device, a piece of hardware, or card not present, which is most commonly used when people are taking orders over the phone. And then it asks for the expiration, the card verification value, or CVV, CID for Amex, which is 4 digits. And then you have the option of entering the account information, the person's first name, last name, email, phone, address. You can also optionally add shipping information, or there's the checkbox here to use the standard account information. And then we support what we call additional custom name value fields. We actually allow you unlimited custom name value fields, but custom name value fields are the idea that you as an individual merchant might need to track some information with sales that wouldn't be tracked by all other customers. So for example, you might want to collect a customer number or an invoice number that would be tied to that order for all times. And if you enter that here, you can go ahead and do it. If I key in, because this is a test system, just a standard fake credit card number, you'll notice that we do what's called credit card checking, where we verify if the card could be valid or not. If it's not possibly a valid card, in other words, if you've miskeyed or somebody's provided you a number in error, the system will automatically tell you that, which prevents you from being charged an authorization fee on a card that wouldn't otherwise ever be accepted. If the card is valid, the system will allow you to continue, and then you can go ahead and choose the expiration date, the CVV information, enter the cardholder's name. Address is optional, but if you include the address, an address verification check will be performed when the credit card is processed, and the value of that might help you in the case where that transaction might be disputed in the future. And again, the custom name value fields can be anything. A ridiculous example I like to provide is eye color. The reason is because eye color has absolutely nothing to do with the credit card transaction. But if you tell me how many blue-eyed customers you have, I can give you a report and tell you exactly how many people have blue eyes. When you submit the transaction immediately, you get a transaction approval receipt and the option to go ahead and print that receipt from your local computer. We also have an option I'll show you later on that if you included an email address, our system can automatically email a copy of the receipt to either you or the cardholder. And immediately after processing a transaction, if you go to Reporting and Transaction Search, you'll see that that transaction is immediately available in real time. More on reporting later. Actually, if I briefly look at that report, you'll notice that we have a reference section. And in that reference, we have something called a GUID, a Global Unique ID. This big ugly number is very important to our system because it allows us to store all credit cards for all time throughout our system. So when I go back to that virtual terminal, if I chose the option of token instead of card, I can paste that global unique ID, that GUID, into our field, and by clicking find, I immediately retrieve that credit card data in a secure masked format. So the value is, and this is quite unique to us, we can go ahead and process transactions, either a void, a refund, or a subsequent sale without having to have that card number again. Again, this is really unique because a lot of times our competitors will say you need to contact that cardholder and obtain that credit card number again in order to do any subsequent sale. And that's not the case here. So this solves the problem for whenever you've done a transaction and maybe you've miskeyed the amount or the customer has changed their order, you can go back and make changes to that order. From the transaction dropdown, this user account currently only has a sale, but that again is a configuration setting, and so we could go in and we could turn on this account for any number of additional transaction types. By the way, you'll notice when I did the token lookup, it retrieved the address information I entered and the user-defined information. So if I hit submit, I now get another subsequent transaction approved. So let's look at the transaction reporting quickly. Transaction reporting, first and foremost, has a date range. It has a start date and an end date, and by default, our date range is only 3 days. However, within Transaction Search, you can expand that to any 30-day window, and that 30-day window can go back in time from the very beginning of time. In other words, if you were processing with us when we started in 2010, you could go back to the early days of 2010 and look for any transactions that you processed. But it's still within just the 30-day window. We have other reports that allow you to search wider ranges, but for Transaction Search, you can do that 30-day window. So if I click the drop down and I say I want to look back through July 9th, because that's more than 30 days, and hit search, you'll notice you get this warning at the top that says additional search parameters are required for a date range exceeding 31 days. So if I change this to just the 11th and hit search, you'll immediately get back, in this case, 210 transactions for this account, which span that date range. If I reset it, it will reset that start date to the original date. Under transaction information, you can go ahead and search based on either a dollar amount, or by clicking on this show amount range, you can go ahead and give it a range. So for example, you just saw me process a transaction for $10 and $1. I could go ahead and say I want to look for any transaction between $9 and $11. And over the last 3 days, when I do that search, I get only one record, which is the $10 transaction we processed just a second ago. From the transaction search screen, you can always go back to the search results by clicking on the top left corner where it says transaction search. And by doing that, it shows you the results that came back from that previous search. If there's only one search result, the system will automatically open that to let you see the details of that transaction. You'll also notice that we give you, within the transaction information, the ability to search for the entire PAN, or personal account number. That's an industry term for the credit card number, or the last four. The fake credit card number I used just a second ago had a last four of 1111. And so when I hit search, because we've done 2 transactions with that card number, actually, it looks like several transactions with that card number, you'll notice that that card number shows up multiple times, and I'm not automatically entered into that transaction. I can also search for just the person's last name. I used my last name in that previous example, so if I hit enter Lepic and hit search, you only get those results. Of course, same is true of first name. And email, if it were provided. The 2 black tabs at the bottom, additional custom fields and advanced field criteria. Additional custom name fields are what I explained earlier. And so if I came in here and I said I want to look for anybody that has an eye color, again, as ridiculous as that is, of blue, and I hit search, I get back only those 2 transactions where I included that user-defined field. So you can search on the information that you're looking for yourself, like for example, that I gave of invoice number or customer ID number, or whatever might be important to your business. like that. The advanced field criteria is really helpful when you're searching for something very specific. So within advanced field criteria, you can search for all transaction types, which we have them all listed here, or you can say I'm only looking for a sale transaction or maybe an authorization. Maybe I'm only looking for a refund. You can also choose the card type. I know it's an American Express, or I know it's a Visa card, for example. If you have the transaction global unique ID, you can paste it here and pull up that exact transaction. Global unique IDs are included in all of our external reporting. You can also go ahead and search for approved transactions, declined transactions, or the default is both approved and declined. You can do advanced searches looking for specific response codes. This means if there's a particular type of decline, maybe you're looking for just a transaction that was declined based on non-sufficient funds. There is a list of several, almost 100 different response codes available, and Transaction Services Support can provide you that list. So let's take a quick look at one of the transactions that I just processed to show you the individual sections of the reporting. So first of all, you'll notice that when you come into the transaction search for an individual transaction, there are a number of these different bubbles. These bubbles are all broken down into different nodes or sections of the transaction to make it easy to find what you might be looking for. Along the top right, we proactively look at the transaction and determine what actions can be performed against this transaction. So right now it says perform an action void. A void is defined as stopping the transaction from settling, but if this transaction had already settled, in fact, let me go find one that's done that, I can show you that the option to void that transaction is no longer available, and instead there's now perform an action return. Whenever you click on this option to either void or return, all the system does is it processes by passing you back into the virtual terminal. It copies that global unique ID, again, because these are usually long and difficult numbers, so it carries that over for you, along with the amount of the earlier sale. So this allows you the opportunity, if you want to go ahead and only process a return for a certain amount, you can change that. If there were any account information, like I showed before with the first name, last name, or the address information, or the custom name fields, that would also be passed in. And then when you process that transaction, again, it immediately tells you that that transaction is approved and it shows it in the system. The void or the return would also have a new global unique ID in that case. All right, so let's go back and look at that individual transaction, the earlier sale, and go through the detail of that transaction. So at the top left, you have the details section, and this shows you what we call the tran type. Basically, what are we doing? We're doing a credit card transaction. The tran action, what type of credit card transaction? In this case, we're doing a sale. The amount. Separately, we list an approved amount, and some people have a question why an amount might be different than the approved amount. There are several cases where we might get an approved amount different than the amount. In one case, maybe a debit card has less than the full amount you're trying to authorize, in which case you would get what's called a partial approval. There are configuration settings that allow you to determine whether or not you want to accept partial approvals or not, and those can be turned on by default, so you don't necessarily have to worry about it. In other words, if you don't want to accept partial approvals for whatever reason, and we turn this off, the transaction would show up to you as a decline, and we would automatically reverse that transaction. It also shows the IP address of where that transaction took place. Now, I just processed this from the virtual terminal, and as a result, this IP address represents my computer here, but if you click on it, it will actually map to the physical location of where that transaction happened. This is designed to allow you to scrutinize orders to determine whether or not they are as you expected them. The account node shows more detail about that information. So it shows you that it was a Visa card instead of just the fact that it was a credit sale. It shows you the last four of the credit card number. It shows you the expiration date. And then we take the name of the card either as it's key entered, or if you swipe the card, we take that from the track data and populate it. the address information that was provided, and then of course the country. We have a map button at the top right-hand corner, which also goes ahead and allows you to, again, see the map of the IP address. The user-defined fields that I passed in are displayed here. So again, you can search based on, in this case, the invoice number or the eye color, or whatever specific information you might be looking for. We have an industry data node that shows how the transaction was processed. This was a card not present transaction because I key entered it, and an ECI indicator, or electronic commerce indicator, which helps you understand how that transaction was taken. Again, we have the global unique ID, the date and time of the transaction, and then the current status. Status of open just simply means that it hasn't been settled yet, which is why I could still potentially void this transaction. The result node shows the response code of 00. That's part of that list I mentioned, which 00 indicates that the transaction was approved. Right underneath that, the response text shows that it was approved. And then we show the address verification results, which in this case, it was not a match. And then the CVV, or the card verification value results. Again, that's not a match. These are indications after a transaction has been processed to let the merchant know whether or not they think that this is a legitimate transaction. In some cases, the fact that these don't match might give you pause or concern as to why to fulfill that order. And then finally, there's an approval code, which is passed through and printed on the receipt. You'll notice we also track the user's name and then the batch information, including a link to view the batch. In a minute, I'll show you the batch reporting functionality, but this view batch option is most commonly used by our support team when a merchant might call us and say, I don't believe I was paid for an individual transaction. What we'll do is we'll find that transaction, click that view batch, and then marry that batch with the deposit that is reconciled on a daily basis. And then finally, you'll notice at the bottom, there are two more collapsed links, one of which is to add view notes. We allow our merchants to add a note to any transaction. So if there's any information that you want to make sure that you've captured, maybe you've had a research or you've had a customer call about a transaction, you can add those notes here. And then related transactions. And I'll show you an example of a related transaction. If I go back to the transaction where we did the void, the return, in this return, if I click on related transaction, it shows me the original sale that we processed. So under the tools section, there are a number of different tool options, and these are all configurations. So if you see anything in this demonstration that you might not currently have in your existing login that might interest you, feel free to call customer service and we can talk to you about getting those options turned on. But one of the other most common tool modules that are used is the user management tool. The user management tool allows you to either create or have us create for you unlimited users. For this particular client, we currently have 2 users, and this is my user setting. Within the user, we track the user's name, email, first name, last name, the login information, the next time that the password will be changed, which is a 3-month rolling window, whether or not the account has been locked. Accounts are locked after 3 failed password attempts. The user permissions, which is referring to the inheritance, I'll explain that in a second, and then the number of times that the user's logged in, from what IP address, and using what browser. You'll notice because I'm looking at my current user account, it shows that the session length expires in 15 minutes. In other words, I'm still currently logged in. I do have the capability of booting a user off of the system in real time. And this is important sometimes when you might have multiple users and maybe you need to decline somebody access. We can go back in and remove access from that person. At the top right, you have the option to go back at the search view to see the users that you have. You can go ahead and inactivate any given user, or you can go ahead and add a user. Our customer service is there to support you if you want their help to create any number of users. Generally, what we require is that the person's first name, last name, email address, and then any permissions that they might be required to have. So an example of a user with some limited permissions, if I come in here and I say test at trxservices.com and test at trxservices.com, test user, but in this case, I give the person's user permissions as transaction restricted. This means I now have the ability to go ahead and designate exactly which transaction types that they might be required to perform. Transaction Services Customer Service can assist you in determining what transaction types need to be set. Most merchants might not need such restriction, but if you do, our customer service can guide you through that process. As you can see, we have a large number of transaction types, any one of which could be turned on or turned off for any given user. Other tools within the tool system includes our custom rule management option. Rule management is very flexible and can sometimes appear complex because what we have is a Boolean logic system that allows us to designate any number of fields to trigger any type of event. So instead of asking customers or even our customer service to try going through the thousands of different combinations of options to create a rule, at the top right corner on the black bar, we have a link that says, choose a rule template. If you choose that rule template, it opens up a window that have a large number of the most commonly used rules. These are rules that we've seen over time that our merchants have requested. And you'll notice at the bottom there's an empty spot here. It's because these templates are constantly expanding. As our customers come to us and tell us there's a new rule that we would like to employ, we decide whether or not this is a rule that more of our customers might decide that they would need, and then we add those templates on an ongoing basis. We encourage our customers to go ahead and correspond with us to tell us what things are important to them as it comes to rule management. One or two of the most common rules include an amount error or an approved sale. So the idea of that rule is maybe on an approved sale, you want to send an email. When a sale is approved by triggering this rule, we can go ahead and create an alert, which would then send an email to the cardholder telling them thank you for your order. And those alerts, as I'll show you in a minute, are highly customizable. Some of the more unusual rule templates are items such as whether the CVV or the address verification mismatches. Some merchants decide that if we provide address information and that address doesn't match, they don't want to accept that order. A lot of times the card issuing bank will actually accept that order even though that information doesn't match. So we can easily create a rule that will automatically decline a transaction when certain parameters such as the address don't match that as the bank. One or two of the more unusual rules that we have in place include swipe required. And there's an origin story to this. We had a merchant who was selling a large average ticket and swearing that they were only going to sell it in a card-present retail environment. But because of the large average ticket, we wanted to make sure that for their safety and ours, that transaction was always swiped. So we created this swipe-only rule, and then the customer called us within minutes of the account being opened saying, I couldn't process a transaction. We went to look, and it was because that transaction was key entered. And they said, well, only our eBay orders, which obviously all of their transactions weren't being swiped, so that rule helped actually get to the bottom of how that customer was actually taking transactions. We also have rules around GeoIP, basically whether or not the IP address is coming in from regions outside the United States, whether or not they're mismatched. Perhaps the cardholder is telling you that they're in Michigan, but their IP address shows that they're in Southern Africa. Those types of rules can automatically trigger. And this type of fraud functionality is usually sold by our competitors at a premium, but it's included with all of our processing. So part and parcel to the rule system is the alert management system. Transaction Services Alert Management is the mechanism or the module that we use to go ahead and send outgoing alerts to our customers. At the top right corner, there's Create Alert option. And when you create the alert, you have the option to go ahead and establish either an email alert, a background post alert, or a text message alert. So some of the ways that this is this system is used most commonly would be, I want to send an email receipt to my cardholder when they have an approved sale. But some less common ways might be, I would like to receive a text message when a particular type of transaction happens that I might not otherwise be made aware of. We have a bar in Pennsylvania that closes every night at 2 o'clock in the morning, but the manager goes home every night at 10 o'clock, and he wants to see a text message on his phone between 10 p.m. and 2 o'clock in the morning if one of his bartenders processes a refund. Basically, he wants to see if anybody's stealing from him. And so by allowing this text messaging, he can actually proactively be notified if somebody's processing a refund. Background post notifications are often used with fulfillment centers. Perhaps for every approved sale, you want to tell a third party, please ship my product, and this text message allows us to configure this very quickly. Again, because this tool is so flexible, what we've done is we've created a number of templates. And so if I click here to insert a standard email template, we have a standard email receipt, email receipts with specifics as it pertains to our surcharging product, batch settlement receipts, batch close receipts, support ticket emails, and then account statement emails. And like with the rule system, we're constantly expanding this series of templates. If a merchant tells us that they have an email type that we think many customers would be interested in, we could easily add it to this template list. If I click the standard email template, you'll notice what it inserts is a very generic email receipt order. Again, this is highly customizable. We can go ahead for a small fee, add our merchant's logos, looks, feels, color, and any user-defined data that you might pass in with an individual order. Within the alert field, we'll give an alert a description, a subject, so we might say, and then we can say it's coming from a particular address. And then display this. We can also CC or BCC receipts. And so a common request that the customer might give it, the merchant might give us, is that they would like to be blind copied on every sales receipt that goes out to their customers so they can also see what we've delivered. At the bottom left-hand corner, this page is currently in our edit mode, but by clicking on a link, you can see the same information in standard HTML, which can easily be modified, or you can look at it in preview mode. You'll notice that these special brackets are showing you where we have placeholders for the data that we'd be providing from the order. Transaction Services also offers our proprietary StoredSafe tokenization system. The StoredSafe system, like all of our other pages, allow you first and foremost to search for any existing records, or in the top right-hand corner, add a new wallet. If I search for a record, you get a result back of all of the various wallets that have already been created. If I go ahead and I create or click on one individual record, what you'll see is the page is made up of, first and foremost, the wallet token, the generic wallet description, an account token, which we allow to have multiple accounts within an individual wallet, just like you might within your own wallet. You might have a wallet, you might have a Visa card, a MasterCard. You can create multiple accounts within your wallet. A lot of times our customers will create a wallet that has only one payment mechanism within it, in which case then they can either reference the wallet token or the account token, and Transaction Services will process that transaction accordingly. Again, this is a PCI, or Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard compliant solution, so at no point do we give you the card data back, but we show a truncated version of the credit card displaying the last four of the card, so it can be identified when dealing with your customer. The address, name, and account information is provided. Ship to information is optionally included separately, and like with everything else, you have a custom name value field, which you can optionally include. The bottommost bar includes the previous transactions, where you can go in and look at any transactions that are related to this particular wallet. At the top, there's a new option under StoredSafe. So like before, you have search or add a new wallet, but now we have process transaction. And like with some of the other reporting modules, when I click process transaction, this passes you back to the virtual terminal, automatically retrieves the token, shows the card number in a masked format, and allows you to enter a new dollar amount and process that transaction without having to obtain that card data from the cardholder again. If I go back to StorageSafe and I choose to add a new wallet, you'll notice the first thing it asks you for is a wallet description. Wallet description is any information you care to provide. So I can just call this David's wallet. There's also a description under the account. And so this might be something like David's Visa. I have the option for card or ACH. We support ACH processing for some of our customers. There's a separate application. And then you put in the specific information for the cardholder. Again, you don't have to provide all of the information, but the more information you provide, the more feature functionality we can offer. So for example, here I'm asking for an email address. That's not required, but if I include the email address, we can automatically send email receipts every time a transaction is processed for that customer. Same type of thing with the phone number. You don't have to provide the phone number, but perhaps you are doing our alert system. You're using our alert system to do SMS text messaging. If you provide a phone number there, we can text message a receipt. You enter the card number. Again, I'm using a commonly used fake credit card number and an expiration date in the future. If the address is provided, address information will be checked on every subsequent transaction. Shipping information is optional. Custom name value field are not required, but if you have any field that you want to provide, you can provide it here. And then finally, you click Save. When you click Save, the StorageSafe token number is created, and that would show up in any of your search results. Just like before, I was saying that the rule management is tied in with the alert management system. The StorageSafe system is a component of our recurring payment solution. Now, all of our merchants don't necessarily have a need for recurring payments, but if you do, by calling customer service or notifying your original salesperson, we can easily turn on our recurring payment module. Like all of our other modules, the recurring payment module default page allows you to search for any recurring transactions, or you can go ahead and add a new recurring option. The recurring payment module, sometimes people have some questions about what some of the fields mean, so I'll go through them all briefly here. Like with some of our previous screens, there's a description. The description is really just meant there for your own common sense to let you know what the recurring module is. So for example, here I could say, this is David's recurring payment. The first thing you're doing is you're designating that it's a billing type of sale. So at some regular interval, we'll be doing a new sale. You can designate how often, and so it says every blank, and you have the options of days, months, or years. Some customers would typically want to process a transaction every 1 month, or some customers prefer to process a transaction every 30 days. It's essentially the same thing. The difference is in months with 31 days, you would actually be increasing that increment. There's questions that come up about the initial amount versus the recurring amount, and we've put little tooltips here. So if you click on this, this will tell you that the initial amount is the amount that will be charged on the first date of billing. So if I come in here and I say I want to process a $1 transaction, but I want to have a recurring transaction amount of $19.95, and I want a start date of someday in the future. So maybe you don't want this recurring schedule to start until the 31st of the month. There are also questions about the retry count and the retry frequency. Retry count and retry frequency we most commonly recommend that you put the number 3 for both of these fields. What this means is that if a recurring transaction is declined for non-sufficient funds, we will automatically retry that transaction a total of 3 times over a period of every 3 days. This is the maximum that Visa will allow, and it's a compliance feature that you optionally would do less, not at all, or this type of retry frequency. We're not allowed to retry transactions that are declined for reasons other than non-sufficient funds. In other words, if a decline comes back because the card has been canceled, we would not automatically retry to process that transaction. It would never eventually be approved. The end criteria at the bottom of the recurring payment have 4 different options. None, which is the idea that you're going to bill the person repeatedly until such time that you stop the recurring transaction. X number of occurrences if you want to bill the person only a set number of times. For example, if you say, I want to bill them 5 times. An amount where you could bill them $19.95 until, let's say, $150 is processed. In the event that the numbers don't work out, the system will actually process the last transaction for the random amount that totals the $150 in this instance, or until a set date is selected. And you can navigate through to whatever date that would be. So in other words, in this case, they'd be charged $19.95 until, let's say, May 1st of 2017. Underneath the end criteria, it says, what would you like to do? And you have 2 options. You can either add a new wallet or assign an available wallet. Adding a new wallet is just going to send you back to the storage safe option where you create that wallet, or assigning an available wallet brings you back to the storage safe section where you can search for a wallet. And like before, you can go ahead and search based on the person's specific information. And so if I come here and I enter my first name, last name, and search, I'm going to get back the wallet information that we created just a few moments ago. You'll notice that there's one account, and that account has a radio button in the right-hand side. If you select that account and then click Save, it will tell you at the top that the recurring payment has been saved successfully. So now we've been returned back to the recurring module where we have David's recurring payment, and it shows the wallet that we've assigned, and now gives you 2 additional features. Previous transactions, of which we wouldn't expect any, but they would be displayed if they're there. And then future transactions, where the system calculates up to the next year of transactions that would be processed. It'll also show you the scheduled transaction total amount, so you can verify that the recurring transaction that you've established is as you expect it to be processed. At the right-hand side, underneath retry frequency, once a recurring transaction has been saved, you'll see the current amount, which $0 has been processed, and then the current count. And so it would show you if any transactions happened. If I look at an older recurring record, what you'll notice is that in addition to the future scheduled transactions, I can also see a detailed list of all of the times that that transaction had been processed previously. And the current amount shows how much has been processed to date and the number of transactions that have been processed to date. This example has an end criteria of none, so it'll just continue to bill forever. Beyond that, each of these individual records are hyperlinks that would take you into the transaction detail that we saw before. So, for example, maybe one of your cardholders has a problem with some service that was provided, in this case back in June of 2016. By going to this recurring record, seeing that transaction, clicking on that transaction, you can view the details, and then again you can perform an action. So perhaps you want to go ahead and perform a refund on one of those transactions. You can do it without obtaining the cardholder information from the beginning of time. Okay, so I've shown the virtual terminal, user management, storage safe, the rules, the alerts, and the recurring payments. Transaction Services also offers a hosted pay page module. The idea of a hosted pay page is sometimes a customer wants to be able to accept a simple order, but they don't want to have an e-commerce website designed to build that message and send that message. What we can do is create a link to a page that we host that can be decorated to look like the merchant's page, and that page can accept that simple credit card transaction. At the top right, just like before, we have the search option and the Add New Pay Page. If I click Add New Pay Page, this option is also very flexible. So we allow the merchant to add their own HTML, a page title, and then separate URLs where it would link back to the merchant's website for either an approved transaction or a declined transaction. We can turn on or off which payment types are accepted, and we can turn on and off which fields are displayed and required. This option right here says Show Save Account Prompt. If that's the case, we will automatically create a storage safe token for the merchant, allowing them to save the cardholder's billing information for any subsequent orders or recurring transactions if that's needed. If I go back and I search across the system for some common pay pages, here's an example of one of the pay pages that the Transaction Services Support team created for our customers. Once a page has been saved, we have the option of previewing that page. This is just for test purposes to make sure that it looks the way that the customer wants. And so when we click that preview page, it will open a new link that shows how that page is made to be displayed. So here's an example of a hosted pay page for one of our customers, the Mega Morning Deals. In this case, we have the billing information, the shipping information, the credit card payment information, a summary of the description, and then a checkout option. When the cardholder enters their information on this screen and pushes submit, they'll either be redirected to the merchant's approved page or their declined page, and at the same time configured to go ahead and receive a receipt information email, and the merchant can be notified to ship the product. Transaction services reporting is some of the best in the industry. We allow our customers to do searches based on the individual transaction, as I explained before, but we also allow for batch reporting. Batch reporting shows the merchant what they've processed over the course of any day or given days, or if they have multiple batches in a day. So if I search across our test system for various batches, you'll see we have many different batches. Batch names help indicate whether or not that batch was originated from, in this case, our system, or if you have a terminal batch and you have multiple terminals, you would see multiple batch names as it designates the individual terminal. The batch type, in this case, we're doing all credit card transactions. The status of the batch, whether or not the batch is currently open, closed, or settled. Net amounts that are within that batch. Bank card amounts, the difference of which is usually American Express. American Express has only recently allowed transaction services to settle batches for them, so older customers would see that the difference between a net amount and a bank card amount is their Amex volume. And then it shows 3 dates: the date that the batch was opened, the date that the batch was closed, and then the settle date. And you'll notice if you hover over those dates, there's a small screen that's displayed that shows the exact time to the second that that batch was opened, the time to the second that that batch was closed, and then the time to the second that that batch was settled. Most of the transaction services merchants are on what's known as host settle, which means that we'll automatically close that batch for you and automatically settle that batch for you. So this most typically takes the form of when merchants are accustomed to having to go to their terminal and press a button to close the batch. We also offer what's known as terminal host capture, where you can still do that, but we don't recommend it because it is just one more thing that the merchant could potentially forget at the end of the day. And if you don't close your batches and settle your batches within a 24-hour period, those credit card transactions are subject to potentially costing you more money. So by a host close, host capture solution, we can go ahead and assure that the merchant receives the best possible rate for their credit card transactions. When you find a batch, you can click on that individual batch and it will show you the detail within that transaction batch. So at the top, we show batch details that include, again, the net amount, the bank card amount, the amount of debits versus credits. That's whether or not you're taking money or giving money back to the cardholder. Again, it shows those 3 dates, the date at the time of the batch was open and closed, and then settled. Whether or not there were any voids, tips, if you have a restaurant or a service that receives tip-type hospitality, and then a summary of the various card types. In this case, you'll notice we have one unknown, MasterCard, and Visa. So a lot of times we get the question, what happened with the unknown? And most typically what happens there is a card was entered in error, and as a result, we don't know what type of card it was. In fact, the unknown card types here were all declined because they were of a card number that we can't identify, potentially miskeyed. Like with all of our other reporting, when you see a transaction, you can go ahead and click on that transaction, and it will return you to the transaction detail page, which shows you all of the information. And as I mentioned before, that transaction detail includes a batch link, which links you back to that batch that shows those transactions. You'll notice all of our reporting contains a download report option. Download report is usually available in 2 or 3 flavors. One of those flavors is CSV, or a comma-separated value. This is most commonly opened in Excel. And another version is XML. The reason we provide XML is that the XML report is what's natively being delivered by our system, and it contains more information than what is typically included in the CSV format. So if I click on that CSV format, it will download a link. And then when you click on that batch report, it will open Excel and show you all of the transactions that were contained within that report. So here's an example of the batch report with the detail level. So when we open this, the CSV file can be opened with Excel, but if your computer isn't currently configured to open CSV with Excel, you could either configure it to do so or open Excel and then open this file. You'll notice within Excel, there's the option under Data to open from text, and you can choose your CSV file. From the batch report summary page, when I search for multiple batches, there's a checkbox at the top that says check all 7 batches and that there's a limit of 100 batches. You could either individually check the batches that you're interested in, or by checking that one box, it'll automatically check all 7 of the batches. And then from the download report option, you now have 4 options. You can either get the batch summary or the CSV detail report. Either of those are downloaded in CSV and show basically the information that's available on the screen. Or you can download the XML summary or the XML detail report. The XML contains additional data than the CSV, and one of the most notable components of the XML would be any user-defined data that you might include. In addition to the batch report, we have the daily detail report. The daily detail report is actually very similar to the batch report, but it's based on a 24-hour period. So it allows you to select just any individual day. The only difference between the daily detail report and the batch report is that if you have multiple batches in a given day, the daily detail report will show you all of those transactions combined together. It also gives you a summary, and like the batch detail, allows you to download this into a CSV format. Under reporting, we also have a ledger report. The ledger report is the money that's been deposited in and out of an individual merchant's account. Again, like all of our other reports, there's a start date and an end date, and you can go ahead and change that to basically any dates that you want. We also have a ledger category. Ledger categories allow you to search for individual deposit types. Some of those types include a daily interchange, a daily discount, daily discount separate or daily interchange separate, which I can explain. the deposits, which is probably the most common, month-end fees or monthly fees, reserves in the rare event that we have to take a reserve on a merchant account, adjustments, chargebacks, or all. So for this particular account, if I just search for all, you see individual deposits for each one, and right at the end of the month, in this case 7/29, you see that fees were pulled out for that merchant. If I wanted to search to see if this merchant has had a chargeback, I would have to search over an extended period of time. And when I do, there were a few chargebacks that have come through. You'll notice that there's both a debit column and a credit column. So a debit column means that a chargeback happened, and in this case, we pulled $30 from that merchant, and then the merchant fought the chargeback, and some days later, $30 was placed back into that merchant's account. You can also search on a ledger report for select dollar amounts. So if I reset and say, let's select for any deposit between the amount of $1,000 and $1,500, I can go ahead and expand that range and find those individual batches that were for those amounts, in this case, each one of which are deposits. The other point to note on the deposits is that the deposit shows the last 4 digits of the account where the money was deposited, and that's sometimes important when a merchant is changing their depository account. If they're changing banks and they say, okay, on the 1st we want it to move over to this account, this ledger report allows us to see exactly what date we were depositing into the old account versus the new account. There's also a reference number, and that reference number is clearly listed on the month-end statement for the merchant. So not that they necessarily need to tie that out, but if they are going back looking at their month-end paper statement that arrives or is available online, they can go ahead and see that individual deposit. All right. Transaction Services has our exception reporting module. When Transaction Services first started building these suites, we didn't think that we were going to have much demand for chargeback responses. But what we found was that the existing industry standard was below par for what we expected for our merchants to have. A lot of merchants were receiving mailed notifications of chargebacks, and were often confused as how to handle it. So we created our exception reporting module to give our customers real-time notification when a chargeback or a dispute is received. First and foremost, we email our customers when a chargeback is received, so they're given real-time notification of a chargeback, but then that email contains a link that allows them to log into our systems where they can search over any date range for an exception. When you search an exception, various chargebacks will be returned within the date range that you search. And at the summary page, you'll notice what you see is the chargeback amount, the chargeback reason code, which is sometimes foreign to people, the type of chargeback, whether or not it was a first chargeback or maybe a pre-arbitration request, a issuer reference number, which helps us tie that to the original sale, the case number, which is used internally to identify that particular chargeback, and then the date and time that that chargeback was received. If we click on the individual row, we will see the detail of that chargeback. In this case, what you'll notice is that the chargeback was received on 5/3 of 2016 and was for a dollar amount of $36. That cryptic chargeback reason code of 80 is spelled out here for the merchant, telling them that the incorrect transaction amount or account number was processed. It shows that the merchant was debited that $36, and then there are merchant comments. It says the incorrect account number or incorrect amount was billed. Supply sales ticket showing the correct account number and or correct amount billed. The transaction amount was $25, not $36. In this case, the debit information, the PDF, is the same PDF that Visa requires us mail or fax to the customer. So it's made available here in real time so the merchant can go ahead and respond to the chargeback as they see fit. If I look at an older chargeback, or let me actually look at a reversal. So what I'm looking for here is a chargeback that the merchant has responded to and won. So in this example of a chargeback, the chargeback was received back on February 4th of this year. It has the specific case number. It shows that the merchant was debited $17.85, and it shows the debit advice information that needed to be mailed. It also says that the reason was, again, 80, the incorrect transaction amount or account number. The transaction was supposed to be $50.27, not $50.27, which that's interesting. First reversal has a different case number, and this is where the merchant has gone ahead and responded. And so the merchant can respond by either uploading their documents from our portal or by faxing them in at the fax number that was included on the Visa mandated letter. At that point, you'll notice that we very clearly indicate that the merchant won this chargeback with the green dot. The bank was debited and that the merchant was credited. It shows the date that this was reviewed and then resolved. And all of the merchant documentation is included, as is the bank representation and the transaction information. One common question that we get about chargebacks, especially when a merchant is preparing to respond to it, is, I don't recognize this original transaction. When did it happen? We use the acquirer response number to link back to that original sale. And so at the top of every exception detail page, you have a link that says View Original Transaction. When you click that View Original Transaction, it sends you back to the original sale that happened, including an exception node at the bottom that shows that these exceptions were received and processed. We also have two other options on our exception detail page that can be used by our merchants. One says Send a Response Note. This pops open a small window that allows the merchant to type a response to the answer. The value in this is that when you save this note, it automatically creates a PDF that has all of the required information at the top of the page, the case number, the original transaction number, the dollar amount, the merchant information, and uploads this directly to the card brands so the card brands can very quickly get a response. The value of this note page isn't just for your own placekeeping to know what you were responding to, but because it allows you to, in a very easy manner, respond to a chargeback without having to go create a Word document, save it, print it, sign it, scan it, and send it in. We also give you an option for Do Not Pursue. A lot of times merchants might say that a chargeback was actually valid. Maybe they recognize that they weren't supposed to charge a customer at a certain time. So they don't want to fight that chargeback, they just want to accept it. So customers would call and ask us, what should we do when a chargeback is valid? We added a Do Not Pursue button, and when you click that, it prompts you for the question to say, are you sure you want to do that? And if you do, it has you sign stating that you accept this chargeback, in which case the chargeback is then immediately closed and you don't have to worry about it any longer. So I've covered ledger report and exception report in production. I'll go ahead and I'll look at risk analysis. Risk analysis is something that all credit card processors perform on their customers, but Transaction Services is quite unique because of the fact that we make it available to all of our customers. The idea is that this report allows you over an extended period of time to see your processing volume and your chargeback ratio side by side on one screen. So in this particular case, the merchant's processing several $100,000 a month, and this red dot along the bottom represents their chargebacks as a component of their sales. Under the summary report, you'll see processing volume, including counts, average ticket, and this is broken down by card type, Visa, MasterCard, and Discover, credits or refunds, the percent dollar amount, and then the percent of count of those refunds. In other words, they're only refunding 0.01% of their Visa transactions. And then the count and amount of exceptions to include the percentage of the count and the percentage of the amount of the sales for those chargebacks. The reason we do that is Visa and MasterCard monitor chargeback to sales ratios for their customers, for our merchants, separately. Visa concentrates more on the count percentage, more where MasterCard looks at the amount percentage. And then finally, we give you the authorization decline ratio. A lot of times our customers will call us and they'll say, I feel like too many cards are being declined. Keep in mind, it's not within our control when a card is being declined. We're simply passing that card information on to the card issuing bank, and then that card issuing bank is making the decision whether to approve the transaction. But this tool easily allows our merchants to monitor what their decline ratio is over an extended period of time. And then below this report, we have all of the various months that are broken down, and so a merchant can take a spot check at an individual month that they think might have some unusual numbers. By clicking on that individual row, we break down the card type again for that given month and show all of the same stats for just that month. Like all of our other reports, all of our reports are allowed to be downloaded into a CSV, which can be opened in Excel, XML, which contains additional data. But this particular report is also available in a PDF because a lot of our customers like to store it for some review of their portfolio over a period of time, how their account's doing over an extended period. The summary report is actually very similar to the risk analysis report, but gives additional data as it pertains to month-over-month sales and average tickets. So within this summary report, while it doesn't show exceptions, it allows you to see what your average ticket is over an extended period of time. Just like with the risk analysis report, you can go ahead and click on any individual month to see how that month is performing per card brand. And like all of our reports, you can download this into an Excel spreadsheet. One of the reports that Transaction Services makes available to the customers that request it is our interchange report. Our interchange report allows a customer to look at the previous month's processing volume and see in detail how their transactions are qualifying with the card brands. This gets a little complex because of the complexity around interchange. Interchange is a published rate that Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover make available to anybody. And in fact, I often encourage our customers to just Google Visa interchange to find the documentation. It's essentially the same price that's charged for every merchant based on the type of merchant that they are. Because Transaction Services prices our accounts in an interchange plus or a pass-through model, this interchange report allows the merchant to see in detail why they're being charged the amount that they are each month. In this particular case, just running the month of July for the merchant I chose, you can see a wide range of different pricing and dollar amounts that are sorted. Like with all of our reports, all of these are available to be downloaded into an Excel spreadsheet so you can compare your processing volume month over month. And we also give you the detail, here in this case, for MasterCard and Discover to show you what you're paying on each transaction. So it's worth noting that Transaction Services, when an account is configured to receive interchange reports, also make the interchange information available at the transaction level. So if you look for any transaction that has settled at least 24 hours in the past and you click on the transaction search detail, you'll notice that there's an interchange detail module at the bottom. And when you click on it, it will not only show you what that transaction qualified as, in this case Visa CPS small ticket, but it shows the published per item amount and per item percent, and then it calculates out the total that was charged for that transaction. So in this particular case, this $12 transaction, the interchange cost was only 24 cents. Transaction Services closely monitors the interchange qualification for all of its customers to make sure that no merchant is accidentally qualifying for a worse rate. Transaction Services is required by the FDIC's Regulation E to issue a monthly paper statement to all merchants. But we are also able to provide these via PDF through our website, and we store them for our merchants for all time. A lot of our competitors might only make their statements available for a short period of time. In this case, when you go to the account statement section, there's a default date of the last year, but you can expand that to go further back in time and then hit submit. When you do so, those statements are made available. You can click on any individual statement to see the same information that's mailed to you. The transaction services statement has a section called Plan Summary, which basically shows the Interchange Plus component broken down by card type, a list of the daily deposits that have been made. From the ledger report information we provided before, I made mention of the reference number. This is where the reference number is listed for every single day's deposit per card brand. And then finally, we have a breakdown of the miscellaneous fees, most of which are charged by the card brands and then passed through. There is some flexibility on how we configure the fee section of the statement. Some merchants prefer to see more details, some prefer to see less, and some merchants with multiple locations like to see a roll-up summary. All of these are things that can be configured by Transaction Services Customer Service upon your request. And then finally, we have the combined total of the fees at the bottom, along with any merchant statement notes that might be pertinent to your account. Within the account statements section, we've also recently added the merchant's 1099-K. The IRS requires that Transaction Services prints and distributes an annual 1099-K that shows the merchant's processing volume. A lot of times the 1099-K is complained about because of the fact that the volumes might not match to the penny the volumes on the statement. And this is actually a factor of the way that the IRS requires that we calculate and publish those numbers. For additional information, please contact customer service at Transaction Services and we can explain to you how those numbers are derived. The account node also allows a user to reset their password at any time. In other words, even though you'll be prompted to reset your password within 30-day windows, you can choose to change your password at any moment if you wish to. At the top right corner where it shows the username information that's been logged in, Transaction Services has a settings module. And when you roll over settings, there are two different settings types, account settings and user settings. User settings are specific to the individual user account, and account settings are specific to the entire account and all the users underneath it. The user settings page includes some default information for the account and for that user so they can customize the way that the entire module looks for their individual user account. Some of the settings include the time zone, the page that the user starts when they first log onto the site, the number of records that is displayed per search. In this instance, we're displaying 20 records per page, but you can expand that if you'd rather see more data in any one search. We have dashboard preferences that include the various dashboard modules. Those can be configured and then placed to the user's preference. And then the user-defined preset names, where a user can go ahead and add a user-populated name that would appear on the various screens where that's required. And then finally at the bottom, we have a report layout description where we allow customers to configure their own customized report settings. Please contact Transaction Services Customer Service for additional information on how to get custom report layouts. The account settings allow me to set a pre-populated name for all users. In other words, instead of having user number 1 enter invoice number and user number 2 entering customer number, you can designate a single invoice number and all of your users would then be prompted for the same thing. In addition, Transaction Services optionally supports Purchase Card Level 2 and Purchase Card Level 3. This is where the virtual terminal will actually prompt you for additional information when entering an order, the advantage of which is that your credit card transactions can qualify at a better rate for business-to-business purchases. We can default some of the values such as the tax ID and the invoice number. However, user-defined data specifically as it pertains to level 3 is most commonly used with a direct integration. Transaction Services supports a full robust XML API or application programming interface. And again, contact Transaction Services Customer Service if you want additional information about integrating with our systems. The Transaction Services reporting has a Help tab. The Help tab has 2 pages. One is called Support Information and the other is called the Support Ticket. All of our customers aren't automatically turned on for the support ticket, but at the time that we start having tickets created or customer service questions, we'll often turn on that account. If you'd like the support ticket, please contact Transaction Services Customer Service. The support information gives you just basic contact information, our address, our customer service phone number, voice authorization numbers if you ever need to do an authorization over the phone. And then it has 2 links for various modules, manuals that we offer that include our website help manual as well as the chargeback manual, which can get quite extensive. Under the support ticket, you can either log in and add your own new ticket, or if you email support@trxservices.com, this will automatically identify you and create a ticket under your account, and it's automatically assigned to a customer service individual who will then respond to that ticket referencing that ticket number. So if I click an add ticket, the process is as easy as giving that ticket a name or a description. And if you provide some information as to what you're trying to accomplish in that description, it's helpful to our customer service to try to help you in the most efficient way possible. So a common ticket that we'll see created might be, I need to update my checking account information. The ticket has a ticket type. In this case, that would be a task, but if you assign the wrong ticket type, our customer service that picks up this ticket will go ahead and reassign it to whatever is most appropriate. And then the ticket priority. Maybe you need to update your checking information immediately and you deem this priority critical, in which case then you add the note and say, I need to update my checking information. Once you click Save on a ticket, we also have the option to upload any documentation. So if your ticket is more involved or your issue is more involved, you can also go ahead and upload documents. We allow for Excel spreadsheets, Word documents, PDF documents, and images such as JPEGs or GIFs to be uploaded at this time. Other file formats might be rejected. If you email support@trxservices.com with attachments, those attachments will automatically be included.